work for or against the interest of a more constructive.
Rather than
Pan-African. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And so when we look at, and so now we have to create a distinction now, although it's a very loose distinction between Afrocentricity on the one hand and Pan-Africanism on the other. Although there's a lot of overlap, but they're not necessarily the same thing. You know what I'm saying? And why I say that is because for those who are Pan-Africanists, a lot of them are more politically inclined. For those
socialists.
Right? So they're dealing with politics, colonialism, neo-colonialism, that kind of thing. For those who are more Afrocentric, coming on that banner, that's an intellectual tradition, a scholarship tradition that has more cultural concerns, right? So when the Afrocentric comes, he's dealing with, well, what about African culture was degraded and why? And he places conversion to Islam in the category of contributory factors to the degradation of African culture.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? And I believe that there is grounds, for that argument.
There is some ground.
Right?
But what he doesn't do, what he lacks is balance. What he refuses to do is to take on board the positives that Islamic culture or Islam has brought to Africa.
Right.
And by doing that, I think he does a tremendous disservice in the pursuit of truth. It's not a balanced argument. To only look at the demerits of Islam in Africa is to give a very I wouldn't like my child taught that in an Afrocentric Saturday school. I wouldn't want that, because I'll say, but wait, there are so many things that Islamic culture has contributed to Africa, West and East Africa, that such an argument is giving only less than half the picture.
I like the fact that you use the Saturday school example, because I have some experience with this.
Right.
I've taught in an African Saturday school for most of my life. I'm associated with a lot of them. And would you believe me if I told you that generally speaking, African Saturday schools don't have a problem with teaching about Islamic empires in Africa.
Right.
I put it to you that the glory of empires like Mali and Songhai and Kanem Bornu and others, Swahili states and them kind of things there, the glory of those empires was brought to the forefront more by Afrocentric and proto-Afrocentric historians. When I say proto-Afrocentric now, I'm referring to people like John Henrik Clark in particular, and Shakara Diop and them kind of people there. They're prior to the advent of the tradition of Afrocentricity in name, but they inform its development, right? But those black historians who are Pan-Africanists in the inclination, but were not Muslims, were the ones who put forward and raised the profile of these African empires who adhere to Islam on the world stage. And this was done.
I think with Job less East Africa, Job focused less
on East Africa.
Yeah, he didn't focus that much along the eastern seaboard that you mentioned.
But definitely West.
Yeah, definitely the West, because he was from there. You know, he had a particular emotional input in that area. And I think of the ones that you mentioned, yes, it is impossible, you see. I don't know how it could be otherwise, brother, to discuss West Africa without talking about Kanem Borno, as you mentioned, Darfur, Wade, you should mention Songhai and ancient Mali. To mention African history without them would be to be leaving a big black hole.
Totally.
A big time gap empty. So I don't see how it could be otherwise.
Right. But I'm saying that a lot of the Muslim brothers and sisters who are studying these empires now are doing so relying on the work of non-Muslim African-centered historians before them.
Absolutely not. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Here's the rub. When we discuss African history, we are forced to rely on archaeological sources.
Definitely.
We are forced to rely on oral account. And we are forced to rely on written records. Some of the more substantive evidence comes from the written record. If you look at the written record, the majority of the written record was in Arabic. The early Al-Bakri, Al-Mas'udi. You know the names.
I get the point you're making.
So when you talk about, say, Sheikh Anta Diop or Basil Davidson or whomsoever, going to the original text, the original sources written, the corpus.
Come in, bro. Come in.
big man track.
Yes, Go.
The corpus of early African sources are in Arabic, and they were written by Muslim scholars.
Yes.
So I think perhaps if an Afrocentrist
Yes.
says that he is the first to highlight
Yes.
Mali, Ghana, Songhai, Kanem Borno, no, the sources from which he got the material, the original sources, not the, he could have got them from the Orientalists, but the Orientalists got them translated out of Arabic. People like Nehemiah Lepsion and these scholars translated it from the Arabic.
I take your point, and our points are not actually conflicting.
No.
I would agree that that John Henrik Clark and the like were relying upon the scholarship. Right. Just what I'm saying, written by you mentioned Bakari, Batuta, Masuri, all those people, right?
Ibn al-Athir,
and in texts such as the Tariq al-Sudan, right? All those people.
That's Ahmad Baba,
right?
Mahmoud Kati,
all the people.
And for the record, I read them in Arabic.
But bearing in mind that those will be considered primary sources,
right?
Often from the time. Some of them are not exclusively from the time. Some of them they document the time, but as well as they take into consideration the stories written by the griots of ancient Mali or Songhai.
Right. Yes.
So they incorporate all those things. So
otherwise you have a big you have another black hole.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it's a good point. We're going to come back to that point in a second. But more what I'm talking about though is the fact that I don't know. That the empires of Mali and Songhai were significantly celebrated organically in the Muslim world, outside of Africa, organically by the Ummah, the Muslim Ummah. In the same way that Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, and all these were celebrated by African people who were studying their history and joined Pan-African organizations or the Afrocentric scholarship movement and these kinds of things. You see what I'm saying? So I'm saying that a lot of black Muslims that I've been associated with black Muslims all my life,
Yes.
And I would come and know a lot about these empires that they didn't know.
Right.
And I'm seeing more take it on now, but they because there's YouTube and you've got videos of John Henrik Clark, breaking down the science. And there's a book written by Robin Walker, who's not a Muslim, but has significant chapters, dedicated to breaking down the history of Ghana, of Mali and Songhai, and Kanem Borno, and all these things. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's not as though we've had a tradition of neglecting and rejecting because of the sake of Islam. It's just that there are those who, once they acknowledge that these empires were great, they also go forward to analyze, well, how did the coming of Islam impact the society and the culture in wider ways? And they also would say, and they also will look at, put it this way, the African-centered scholar is no more biased or no more limiting in terms of how they treat that than the Muslim who looks at Mali and Songhai and simply refers to them as Islamic empires in Africa and believes that they were great because of the fact of Islam. You understand what I'm saying?
Let me try to unpack some of what you said there.
Yes.
First of all, if you look at Africa as a whole,
yes,
you have some empires that were Islamic,
yes,
and some that were not.
Yes.
If you're going to do history,
yes,
you have to mention that difference. So if you are a historian, you will say this empire has a lot to do with Islam. The writings, we mentioned the scholars of Timbuktu just now, the three scholars of Timbuktu, don't you call the names again?
Yes.
Ahmed Baba, Mahmoud Kati. So when you look at that, you have to say these writings were done in Arabic.
Yes.
These guys were Muslim scholars.
Yes.
And they had a connection with the Muslim world, but because of their sheer distance at the very end of the Muslim world, the nucleus of the Muslim world was not in touch with them. Similarly, until recently, you heard very little about Islam from the Ummah, about Indonesia, because it was that far. And yet Indonesia, if you do a counting of heads, has the most Muslims in the world. So you have that, I would put that down as a function of distance more than anything else.
You think so?
Yes, it's a function of distance. The Muslim scholars spoke about the celebrated people like Mansa Kanka Musa and Muhammad Askia Toure because they actually performed the pilgrimage.
The Hajj,
and they made, much was made of the pilgrimage, and all in Egypt, people talking about it for years. In fact, I have mixed feelings about that because it inspired a greed for gold and all the rest of it. People looking for Timbuktu for gold more than anything else. But so that's what I'm trying to say. The sheer distance of the Muslim world left. Now, as a Muslim, I'm also here to say, because I am a Muslim, and I've been a Muslim a very long time.
Probably longer than I've been alive.
And I've been black also a very long time. I know that there's a tradition of black Muslim scholarship. That perhaps Robin Walker, with all due respect, is a new scholar to me. In mind, I can tell him that to his face.
So what is it? What's the discussion? Is it?
Tune in, listen to him.
Islam within African.
Kinda. Kinda.
No, what we talk. Okay, what you hear the? Okay, you want to hear? Right. Okay. People like I'll tell you what I have been in this game a very long time. I've been in this game, and I can tell you Robin Walker is a recent scholar. I know the book he wrote about Songhai.
Of course he's new.
Most of the sources, I know the book well. I know Saran Keita, the lady who helped him with the research. Most of it is secondary sources.
There's no doubt about that. But Robin Walker is new. John Henrik Clarke is not new.
I'm not sure John Henrik Clarke ever visited Africa.
He did.
Where did he go? And what research?
He's been to Kenya and he's been to West Africa. I can't remember all the countries, but I know it for a fact. But Uncle,
let us go into him and Yosef Ben Yochanan a little.
Yes.
You see, I knew Yosef. I was a personal friend of Dr. Ben.
Okay. I wasn't a friend, but I did meet him.
I knew him very well.
As a child, I did meet him.
He came to Trinidad. We invited him as a member of the Caribbean Historical Society.
Yep.
We invited him, Dr. Charles Finch,
Yep.
Professor Ivan Van Sertima, and of the three, I would say the person with the most real accreditation is Professor Ivan Van Sertima, of the three. Now,
when you say accreditation, you mean that formal institutional accreditation?
Yes.
Right.
It's hard to say these things about elders, but in those days, many of our leaders claimed certification that they did not have. What they did, to their credit, was actually go and do a lot of field work. So they had a lot of knowledge without the actual accreditation. That's a point that's got to be made.
Which Dr. Ben is a pioneer in, that kind of field
think
research.
Professor Henrik Clarke himself has he's what I would call a generalist historian.
Right, well.
He's not a specialist historian. And I argued this before. Chancellor Williams was not a specialist historian either. Now, what I look at are these empires from the inside. I am able to look at the Arabic text and look at how these empires developed. With the greatest of respect to those elders on whose shoulders I'm standing, they were not. Dr. Ben didn't know how to read Arabic.
Of course not.
And he would pronounce Abu Bakr Abu Baker. Things like Abu Baker, right? And you couldn't correct him because you out. Right?
It would tell you about yourself,
Because you out, right? Now, even when scholars start manufacturing their lineage, I have problems. I understand why it had to be done at some stage in history to lend a certain amount of pedigree to back up what you're saying.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have to tell you that I know the old scholars and I know the new scholars. And with the new scholars, they're relying purely on secondary sources. With the older heads of scholars too, they did not read African history from its primary text sources in Arabic. They couldn't do it. So what I am trying to tell you is that I was around a group of people in the 70s who did that. So you may not be, because you're not a Muslim, you may not have been aware that there were Muslims doing it, but I am aware of it.
I'm not
just saying. Just like you're not aware that there are people who get on Muslims, Afrocentrics, Hoteps, who get on Muslims for being sellouts or Trojan horses or Arabian horses. But because I am a Muslim, I get it. And I wouldn't lie about it.
I understand that.
Because you remember when I lost my temper a little bit the other day, and I said to them, none of you all know how to read the Medunetter in the original.
I
You're
heard that.
criticizing us for being Trojan horses or whatever you're calling us, but you can't read your text. You have to rely on white people to translate the Rosetta Stone.
Uncle, all right. Remind me to come back to that point.
Right.
Because with respect, I believe that claim is a little bit unfair.
That's fair.
But fair. I made the argument. Right? No, I hear that.
Your professor, what's his name? The one you brought. The young brother from in Ghana, living in Ghana. No, Diop couldn't even read it properly.
Dr. Ben could read some.
Little.
Yeah, little. But uncle, yeah.
Your man can read it. The guy who speaks about 10 languages. What's your man?
Kwesi Pra?
No, not Pra.
No, Aye Kweyama.
The young dude in Ghana, he's an African American, I think.
Oh.
You were interviewing him the other day.
Abalele Kambon. He can read it.
He can read it.
And I would say.
But here's me. These guys will tell you. Here's what they will tell you.
Yeah.
They will tell you, this is the Meduneta, and this bit the white man mistranslated.
Yeah.
That bit is how do they know that?
Well, I don't read the language.
Exactly.
So I couldn't give you an answer to that question.
What worries me about this, it becomes like I'm boxing with Ali.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I'm boxing with Ali. Every time I try, he move, right? And whereas with Islam is a static target, so people can take pot shots at it. The Quran says this, especially the literalists.
Yeah.
I'm not a literalist, but the literalists, it's easy to be attacking them because that is a block. That book is a block like the Kaaba. It can't move, and you can hit it. Now, with the Afrocentric scholarship, when you come at them and say this, they move. It moves. It becomes a moving target. And I say, look, either it is or it isn't. And that is why you find it is a living, it's surviving, and it's growing. Because basically, it's being transformed by people who are living today into what they want it to be. Now,
right.
That's good and it's bad. Mm-hmm. It's both good and bad.
Uncle, the thing is, first of all, I wasn't making the claim that the scholars that I mentioned are old. The only point I was making with that is that it's not unusual for scholars, historians within the Pan-African or Afrocentric tradition to celebrate Mali and Songhai and other Islamic empires without.
No, but you said Muslims don't do it, and I'm saying
no. It's not that Muslims don't do it, you know. For example, I know, of the fact that Malcolm X in the 1960s, the Nation of Islam in general, was teaching about the fact of some of us coming from the continent being Muslim. Yes, I know that. What I'm saying is, in terms of raising the profile of these empires in Africa, it was largely the scholar. A lot of Malcolm X was taught a lot about Mali and Songhai from John Henry Clark. They knew each other personally.
I know, yeah, they were friends.
Right. So the point I'm making is a lot of this information was brought to the forefront. John Henry Clark defines himself, as a classroom teacher. He never defined himself as the most superior historian. But his studies made him eminent within the community that he was in, and he was given a certain, and he did actually eventually get official accreditation. Yeah, he's not a trained historian,
I know,
but he went and he went through the process. And
the trained historian among them all is Professor Ivan Van Sertima.
Yeah, right.
And I still challenge some of his.
But that's the case. But Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Ben, Chancellor Williams,
Charles Finch,
John G. Jackson,
they
all knew each other.
Right.
Ivan Van Sertima never challenged the credibility of John Henry Clark and Chancellor Williams and these things.
Because
they had disagreements.
I know why they weren't as well. Look, I was close to the people who know them. The ones that I don't know. I was close to the people who know them.
Yeah.
We used to bring some of them to Trinidad. Trinidad was a center of this sort of scholarship in the 70s when I was growing up. So I was grounded in all these traditions. What I am saying is, perhaps I think we are agreeing, so I don't know why we are, why we...
No, let's explore the point.
We're looking at Islam here.
Yes.
And what you're saying is this. The Afrocentric scholars should be given a certain amount of kudos for having highlighted Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. Mali, Songhai, Ghana, and Borno, the Muslim ones. Now, I am saying, fine. But what I am also saying is because I come from the Muslim tradition as well, I know Muslim scholars who were doing it. Because you are not inside the Muslim tradition, you don't know of them.
Not necessarily, Uncle, because...
I'll give you a very big one.
Yeah.
You see, you don't know those names.
Hear what I'm saying? It's not. No, I know, but I don't want what I'm saying to be misunderstood.
Because I sat at their feet.
Yeah.
Like Malam Salahuddin Tayo from Nigeria, who came to Trinidad in the 70s, and the first thing he taught us was, you are not Negroes. The Quran says, call them by their proper names. You are not Negroes.
But Uncle, I'm not saying that there was nobody in the Muslim world doing it. What I'm saying
I can call many.
Yeah, but
you seem to think there were none.
No.
There were many.
Let me clarify my point with all due respect here. What I'm saying is, the profile of African empires being elevated in that way
Right.
that work, was done by these scholars in the Afrocentric
I agree.
scholarship tradition,
I've
right?
agreed with that. I agree with that.
So a
I
lot
agree with
of
that.
so even a lot of black Muslims, if you name 10 names right now of these Muslim scholars that were doing this work,
Right.
they probably couldn't tell you their names, but they could probably tell you the name John Henry Clark.
The reason
Right.
why is because, I'll tell you the reason why. They were not bilingual. He is bilingual. I'm biliterate, or what's the word is.
So would
right?
you concede then that my point doesn't apply to the English-speaking world?
I will concede it.
Yeah.
But I'm being mischievous. I shan't concede it because we have to have a bit of a fight.
Yeah.
It's going too nice. We're too peasant, you know. If we start arguing, it's a bigger crowd.
Yeah.
It's a bigger crowd.
Everything.
No, what it is, because we are biliterate,
Yes.
we have access to these texts in
Yes.
both languages.
Yes.
So the Afrocentrics will speak about, oh, I read this from
Yes.
John Henry Clark.
Yes.
I read it from Professor Shakara Diop.
Yes.
I read it from Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. I
Yes.
read it from Dr. Charles Finch.
Yes.
But none of these wrote or read in Arabic. They never read primary, except Job.
No,
Job
no.
is the only one
Yeah.
who read Arabic.
But most Muslims don't read Arabic.
Who said? Well, no, we're not talking about most Muslims here.
No,
we're
I'm-
talking about
but this is-
scholars. No,
That's the
you're
point.
not-
No,
you are kidnapping
but we're not.
me. You're kidnapping
Uncle, with
me.
respect, we're not.
You're kidnapping me. We're
This
talking
is-
about no. Let me come to it. What I'm saying is this: there were scholars who were teaching this.
Yes.
Because they have access to the primary sources,
Yes.
people in the West wouldn't know about them, even if they're in the West, because they speak into Muslims.
Yes.
And basically, they preach it to the convert. They speak into a select audience.
Yes.
Whereas Afrocentrism, you speak to anybody who is black. Whereas with the Muslim
Is
community,
that the point I'm making?
not really. What you're saying is that we learned about these things, about Mali, Songhai, and Ghana, which I've already agreed. So we can move on from that
Yeah.
by saying that these people
Right.
elevated these
All right.
empires. And I'm saying that Muslim
In
scholarship...
spite of them being Muslim, so them being Muslim was
Yeah.
not an impediment
because they
to,
had
to them to them celebrating their greatness.
They had no beef with Islam. They had
Who that-
no beef.
But
Job had beef with Islam?
no. John Henry Clark was critical of Islam.
He was critical of
and the
Ali
role of Islam.
Mazrui.
No.
He was critical of Ali
No,
Mazrui.
but he was critical of John Henry Clark was one of those who challenged the Abrahamic supremacy
Yep.
of spirituality
Yeah.
in Africa.
Yep.
And so in that context, he criticized
Yep. what
Islam and
religion was
Christianity
Henry Clark?
in that context.
What religion was he?
He comes from a Christian
Yes,
background, but he
and
never professed.
I think he was buried as a Christian as well.
Many are. I know, but Uncle, I know.
This is the
but I
contradiction.
know
A lot of
Rastafari that are buried as
Chancellor
Christians.
Williams was a Christian till the day he died.
Sir.
He was a Christian. So
What is
when
that? What? There are, Uncle. You and I both know,
Yeah.
as Africans coming from the Caribbean, that the church has a role within certain social order,
right?
right? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
But you have to stand by your product.
No.
And that's why Islam wins.
But-
I'll tell you why Islam wins. I'll tell you why. When white people teach black people about Christianity, they don't have a church where black people can't go into. So black people go and form their own Baptist church.
Yes.
With Islam, and this is a hard thing for Afrocentrics to swallow. When an Arab or Arab, he wouldn't have known Pakistanis in those days. When an Arab came to Africa, he prayed with the people, he ate with the people, he sat with the people. What they did,
Why?
let me land. Let me show you.
Why?
No, you're going to do your conspiracy theory when I'm done. What I'm trying to show you is this. When people stand by their product,
Yes.
you are inclined to buy it.
yes.
If people don't, the white man gave us Christianity and then backed it and didn't practice it. He stopped. All these churches are empty. So what happened with black people? Black people said, we just got sold a pup. This religion is a religion that was given to us to control us.
Yes.
So it's passing strange for me to find people like Chancellor Williams still a Christian, knowing fully. Now with Muslims, the difference is in Africa. If you go to any part of as much as I criticize the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or Qatar, wherever you go, a mosque is full, not like a church in England. So what the difference is, and in in Black Africa, where you go, mosques are full. So what Muslims, I think one of the beauties of one of the things that helped spread Islam is the fact that the Arabs actually practiced what they preached and they stood by their product. And when people see that, they are inclined to believe that is conviction. Now, with people, I worry about people, not worry about people like Chancellor Williams. I hear what they say, I read what they say, and he writes things like, at the end of his book, in his conclusion, the white man is the black man's
Eternal.
perpetual eternal. You know the quote, you know the quotation. And I said to myself, well, knowing what you know, why do you continue with this?
Why not? That book, Charles Williams' book is a very interesting one, and I'm very familiar with the fact that my Muslim brothers and sisters have a great problem with that book, and I don't think the criticism that it gets it deserves, frankly. Charles Williams is critical of all kinds of things in that book, including indigenous African societies, spiritualities and cultures.
Which ones, for
right?
example?
Which ones?
Yeah.
Just in general.
No, I should like to cite one.
In terms of...
Give us one. I have not heard him criticize any indigenous tradition.
For example, the Mossi. Yeah?
He loved the Mossi, and so do I.
He did love the
As
Mossi.
do I.
He did love the Mossi. But they got to a point whereby they started
look at those geese flying. Look at them. Those birds.
Yes, sir.
Look at them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
They're looking for
Mama
nesting
nature, you know?
trees.
Mama nature.
Yeah, they're looking for they're nesting trees. They're looking for high trees
Yes,
to
yes,
nest
yes.
in.
You're off topic now.
No, those are African Egyptian geese. They're African. We can talk about them.
It's on subject. It's on subject, right?
Yeah. The Mossi and Chancellor Williams.
He criticizes the fact that they started to deviate from their better held traditions that were protecting them at certain points.
Right.
That whole book is actually an exploration of the weaknesses among our societies that allow for us to be invaded. Right?
Why does he say they deviated?
There are various different reasons. I can't remember all the reasons off the top of my head, but basically he's critiquing the fact that after a while they opened the door for the British and the French at a certain point, and that led to the destruction of the empire, right? Of the nation, right? Now, bear this in mind because we're on the Mossi now, yeah. So let's take the conversation to a deeper level, all right?
But you know, we dealing with Chancellor.
No.
His book.
But I'm gonna deal with it. Yeah. The reason why Chancellor Williams celebrates the Mossi and loves the Mossi is because they were a group of people who were able to withstand and refuse to convert to Islam or Christianity.
Right.
That's why he celebrated it.
Yes.
You would agree with me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in that context, we have to look at why is he celebrating that? You mentioned Mansa Musa.
Yep.
Askia Mohamed Toure, yeah, Askia the Great,
Yeah,
all right,
who fought them.
right, right. Were fought by the Mossi, them kind of thing there, right? Now, these are people that are largely celebrated in African history among all kinds of black people that study African history, Muslims and non-Muslims, yeah, with critiques from
I've heard
others.
them celebrate Mansa Musa, but not so much Askia.
No, man, I grew up in the Pan-African community
mean
with big posters of
I know
Askia,
the
right? And then the kind of
posters,
things right, that's what I'm saying, right? So,
But of course,
right,
there's no way you can avoid it.
right, no.
You can't
but,
not speak about Islam in Africa.
No, but that's the
In
point.
history, yeah.
But that's the point.
No, but you can't you can't not do it.
But I'm not saying that we could. I'm not saying that we can. But we did, right?
Yeah.
So the point.
No,
of the
but I'm
fact
saying,
is,
I have to tie you to this. There
Yes.
was no other way. You'd been left with a chronological black hole.
there is another way. There is another way.
No, you will end up with a chronological
cool.
black
There
hole.
is another way. It's because it's not. You
How
could
could you
you
do
could
it?
celebrate, but celebrate with measure. Yeah. And so what the Afrocentric began to do now
Yep.
was study the history of Mali and Songhai
Right.
and how they came to be in relation to the indigenous systems and social orders that were there at the time,
Right.
and what that relationship was like. So let's deal with this now. You will know about the recent finds of rediscoveries of a lot of the manuscripts that you were mentioning earlier in Mali, and the fact that when they were found, there was a big rush. Some people were trying to destroy them, and these kinds of things. Yeah, these people were not Afrocentrists.
No.
Who were anti-Muslim.
No.
These people were Muslim fundamentalists.
Yes.
Right now, the Afrocentrists said, "Rah, look at this. We found these. Let's go. We want to explore them. We want to see what comes out of them and them kind of things." There, it wasn't us that was on that. Right now, but when we do study these civilization and this history, what do we find? And you will know, for example, the contradictions that brought Askia the Great to power in relation to his predecessors, Sunni Ali, who they said was nominally Muslim.
Right.
Right? Yes, I'm saying he wasn't Muslim enough.
Right.
And his son, I've forgotten his name. It's got out of my head. But he was not Muslim at all.
Right.
Yeah. And Askia came to power because he deposed
Right.
my man because he was not Muslim.
Yes.
And then you get now those manuscripts that they're talking about. The Askias became the dominant force in the society.
Right.
And they began to write the history of the people.